in this country, if you are unaccounted for, you can get abducted, picked up and killed. In India's what we say conflict zone, now, there are three theaters of conflict really in India. One would be Jammu and Kashmir, the other is the northeastern part of India, and then of course it's eastern and central India. Now in Jammu and Kashmir and the northeastern part is where the Indian Army operates. In the third conflict zone, which is also called the Maoist corridor or the Red Corridor, the army does not operate in those parts. Now this is why I'm saying this, is to really make the viewers understand that where the army operates, they operate because there is an act called the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which was actually an act by the Indian Parliament passed in 1958 as an emergency act. And there has been huge opposition by people in these areas and even otherwise against this act, because you can imagine if an emergency act is in place for more than 55 years, which means there is obviously a situation in those parts. Obviously this act hasn't really been able to deliver. Now what the act does is basically talks about impunity. It allows an army personnel, and it doesn't have to be a commissioned officer, even a rank below commissioned officer can actually kill someone based on suspicion. Now this clause of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is what most people are fighting against. It is under this act where excesses have been committed. This act has always allowed personnel in the army to get away with even murder. But when you are covering conflict in these theaters for a very long period of time, and the news of these kind of killings keeps filtering in every now and then, initially perhaps if it's within reachable distance we would go and cover, but in most cases it became ticker news. It really would run as a scroll below the screen, and we would just carry the official version, because also as journalists we could only carry the official version, and there would have been the other version would always be a human rights version or the families of victims version. In many cases I noticed that there wasn't a human rights version or even a family version, but I didn't have time to really go and investigate or even ask. It was there in my head somewhere perhaps. And then I bumped into a serving army officer and who over a drink started talking about the Armed Forces Special Powers Act and other excesses. And that is when he explained something that I did not know, of how there is almost a method to these kind of killings, of how he and his colleagues went about picking up absolutely innocent people. They pick up people who are absolutely unaccounted for in any Indian government data. And that is why in most of these killings, there is no backlash, there is no local, outcry. What was most chilling and what I had absolutely no idea, and I must admit that as a journalist, covering those areas for more than 2 decades, I had no idea that there is a very well-entrenched mafia that actually identifies these kind of people, picks them up, and then sells them as per demand to army units operating out there. The army has a fund. The one fund would be an intelligence fund, which is unaudited. So no military intelligence fund can be audited in our country, in India. So you can do anything with that, really. There is a second fund which is called the Sadbhavana Fund. Sadbhavana is basically each unit in these conflict areas are given a certain amount of money, not much, to carry out goodwill missions. Buying a person would cost you anything between 50,000 to 5 lakhs, which these two funds may not be able to sponsor you. And not just buying the human being, after buying the kill, you also have to buy weapons, because obviously in a firing, that person would have fired back. And those are sophisticated weapons, but cheaper. because they look like sophisticated weapons, but they're perhaps not as sophisticated. But they're still the AK series or MIs, those are available to them. And they are brought from across the border, from Bangladesh mostly. So the two mafias operating parallelly. One mafia will supply you the human beings, the other mafia is going to supply you the arms. Now, so where do they now raise the fund for that amount of money? In those areas, you would know, because of the international border, a lot of smuggling goes on. In fact, India-Bangladesh border, which is about 4,098 kilometer long border, has 68 smuggling corridors. And of course, there are smuggling corridors with Myanmar and with China and Bhutan, other areas as well. What the army does in those units, they don't get involved in the smuggling. Some of them do. Some of them have been arrested with drugs. These are all substantiated facts, so these are not conjectures. What this person who confessed to me said, that they take a certain cut in allowing those smugglers operate in that area or pass by that area, and that would include timber smuggling. That includes river bank sand smuggling, which is also a very big commodity there, narcotics, gun running, and human trafficking.
Since this also happens along the Pakistan border, and newspapers, report on several Pakistani infiltrators being killed quite regularly. So do you suspect that many of those reports could actually be about these staged shootouts?
It's beyond suspicion, because we've had one very, important conviction, despite the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which is the Machil conviction, which the Northern Army commander, the current serving Northern Army commander, was very sure that that these people should be convicted, and a full colonel has been convicted in that. 6 army personnel have been convicted of such an killing that took place in the Machil sector of Jammu and Kashmir, where actually people who were brought in who wanted to work as porters in the army, so they were lured in by offer of recruitment, and then they were killed. And their faces mutilated. So in many cases we found that the faces were mutilated, because what happens then, you pass them off as Pakistan or Afghan Mujahideens coming in. So that has been the practice there in many such cases, which has been proven beyond suspicion, that in those cases there have been laborers who've been picked up from Jammu and Udhampur, taken to the unit of the army, particular unit, kept out there for some time. Their beard would be grown. They would be made to wear a certain kind of dress which terrorists across the border would wear, and then again they would be killed and their faces mutilated. So that has been there. I cannot say of how prevalent that is. We know for sure that this kind of killing has been very, very prevalent in Jammu and Kashmir. But in Jammu and Kashmir, what the army sources say, that they also have genuine firefights with hardcore militants, which does not happen in the northeastern states. We have not learned how to report conflict, or we probably never knew or know how to report conflict. I think conflict reportage has always been in the language of power, language of the establishment. We use words that the army uses. We use words that our politicians and ministers use in press releases and their political speeches. We have not been able to have a lexicon. Look at the semantics of how we report conflict. We just use the official version, which is not something that we should do.
Was it a very difficult book for you to write, either emotionally or otherwise, in terms of getting people to speak to you? Because we are talking about senior army officials or people in the bureaucracy.
Getting the information was not so difficult. I think the difficult part was that, would it have legal implications? My publishers were worried about that. Would it have security implications for the people who were telling me? And that is why I had to keep them anonymous. But keeping all those aside, I think the emotional part, it has been extremely intense and grueling to actually realize that the very incidents that I reported as genuine encounters, in India we call them encounters, were actually on people who had nothing to do with. So in this country, if you are unaccounted for, you can get abducted, picked up and killed.
And do you think your life is under threat?
You know, I've lived on those places and reported. And those were much more serious day-to-day situations that one really confronted. So I'm not really worried about the security aspect, except for the fact that if people who are mentioned here, not by names, but by areas, and they themselves would know that they are mentioned out here, if some of them or one of them also in an impulsive moment feels that maybe I know a little more than what I've written in the book and he wants to harm, but I don't really worry about that so much, because that, as a journalist covering conflicts, that is a professional hazard that you live with. So and you know how to manage it. But the environment in the country today is not the most congenial, and there is very little room now for liberal discussions, for dissent. This book was trending in Pakistan last week, and which did not go down well with the establishment out here. But so far I have not received any hate mail or intimidation, except for very few perhaps on the social media that one is bound to receive.
And do you have any solution in your mind as to how to end this practice, or are you just leaving entirely to the government that they should come up with some plan?
Oh no, the solution to end this practice, and it's a very heinous practice which is also really destroying the disciplined Indian Army. The Indian Army is a very disciplined force, is a very superior force. I think, and the government thinks, and I don't know why the government can't do it, the simple way is to de-link awards and citations from killings. So these killings, mind you, are not done because they want to have a picnic. These killings are done for personal aggrandizement, for the unit's promotion, for international postings like the UN peacekeeping forces, and for going up the ladder, because the army, as you know, is of a pyramidal structure. So beyond a lieutenant colonel rank, which would be mid-30s, late 30s, is when the bloodshed happens, is when people get really axed. And that is, so it's not like every officer who is moved out have killed. But if you are not in favor, and you've got a good number of citations through kills, then you have a better chance of moving up. And your award, your citations, and or even the highest peacetime award, gallantry award of the land, which is the Ashok Chakra. The two serving officers who have received that award, and one of them have been indicted by the highest court of India, the Supreme Court, for carrying out killings of excess to receive that award. But he hasn't been stripped of the award. He still continues to be a part of the Indian Army, receiving full salary and enjoying that award. So as long as we are going to have awards and citations and promotions linked to kills, you are going to have more of such kills. Media, at least in India, I don't know about the West or other countries, is not very comfortable talking about this kind of topic when it hinges on issues of national security. So while they are okay talking and criticizing the police, they are a little sheepish, I think, talking about and disciplined force carrying out. So they will be okay talking about it as aberration, but seeing it as a institutionalized practice is something that the media is a little uncomfortable about, awkward about, and that surprises me.